Hi everyone, it's Nicole here today with Beachy Backgrounds featuring the My Monthly Hero June 2018 card kit and add-ons. I've got 8 cards to share with you today. This is a fairly long video. I wanted to include all of the cards, and I also wanted to make sure and feature just the main kit if that is the only thing that you pick up today. So my first 3 cards are going to feature the main kit only with one additional greeting from another kit, but you could definitely sub that out for a greeting from that main kit if you wanted to. The main kit features this amazing scene builder set and all these little images that are fantastic for creating a beachy scene. So we've got the color layering images for the water here. I've got 3 color combinations. I have listed them across the top of the screen in case you're wondering exactly what inks I'm using to create my color combinations. I am using all Simon Says stamp ink because that's what I have. The mint color combination is mint, mint candy, and teal. The yellow-orange combination is duckling, clementine, and orange peel. And the blue kind of traditional watercolor combination is sea glass, surf blue, and Caribbean blue. What I'm doing is stamping the main image first. I'm using my Misty to do this because I can do this one on top of another if need be, which I really found was useful, especially with the solid image, to get a really crisp image with that first layer stamp. Plus, I can simply clean it off, stamp it over and over again on each new piece of paper, and I could create as many of these cards as I need to. I think these would create a fantastic set of cards. Another thing about this first trio of cards, they're all single layer. Many of the individual images from this stamp set do have coordinating dies that come in the main kit. I didn't use any of them on these cards, but you definitely could do that if you don't want to do maybe just a flat card. I sometimes think it's kind of a fun challenge to do a flat style card. This card features lots of stamping with different colors of ink, inking with distress oxides, embossing with a couple of different colors of embossing ink, including the new sand embossing powder that's included in the kit, which is phenomenal, you guys. So amazing. I'm just in love with it. And just lots of different stamping kinds of things going on, but it builds this very dimensional looking background. So I'm simply continuing to do this. I wanted to show how easy it is to create this water, how phenomenal it looks when layered. Almost every color I stamped more than once. It just gives such a crisp, finished, very clean look once you have all of those layers, and I'm a big fan of that. So this is the mint color combination we're getting ready to finish up here. As I mentioned, the lightest color was mint, then mint candy, which was a little bit darker, and then teal. And look at how that makes that water and horizon line pop. I stamped these kind of about in the middle because I knew I wanted to do something up in the sky. I knew I wanted to do something for the sand. The sand was the primary thing, I guess I want to say, even though I think the whole scene is extremely important. And that is because I could not wait to use the hello greeting from the main kit and the little feet in the sand and emboss them with the sand embossing powder. But before we get there, we have to finish inking up that background. So what I'm going to do with no masking here along the bottom edge at all is take Antique Linen Distress Oxide ink and ink this up. I should mention I stamped all of this on Nina's Smooth White cardstock, and Distress Oxides are pretty forgiving even on this kind of cardstock. It's sometimes hard to really get distress inks to blend really nicely on traditional smooth white cardstock. At least it is for me, but the Distress Oxides tend to be a little bit more forgiving, and so that's what I used. I did not mask it as I mentioned. I'm just going to ink this up, kind of butting that up next to my water, and you can see how that immediately gives that sandy type of beach type feel. And I'm just going to keep working this until I get it the way I want it to look. All three backgrounds are done exactly the same, just different colors for the water and then different colors for the sky. I thought it would look best to do pretty much a tone-on-tone type look, and I took Distress Oxide inks in similar colors to the dye inks that I used for the water to build my sky backgrounds. So we're going to start with the skies now. And I did use a little Post-it tape to mask that off because I wanted to concentrate my ink color towards that horizon line, starting with cracked Pistachio Distress Oxide ink. And we're just going to ink this up and pull that color up to the top of the card. I did try to do an ombre effect as much as possible, where it's darker near the horizon line and then gets lighter as it goes up. Because Distress Oxide inks have pigment ink in them, the ink is going to stay wet longer. So my suggestion is, because we're going to be doing embossing over this, you either heat set this or you let it dry completely, air dry completely, and before you go and do any of your other stamping and embossing. The yellow background was Wild Honey Distress Oxide ink, that sky there, and more like a setting sunset was kind of what I was going for. And then my traditional blue sky and blue water is Broken China Distress Oxide ink. And we're just going to finish getting this all inked up, and then we can start doing some of those finishing touches or the next layer here. So it's dye ink stamping, Distress Oxide ink inking, and then we're going to start doing our stamping, embossing, and then the finishing little scene building details is the order that I did my cards. So there are my three backgrounds. I did lay everything out to kind of give me an idea of how it was all going to go together. We're going to start with the clouds. The clouds are also color layering. To do this, I stamped my more solid image cloud with white pigment ink. And I stamped this several times because it's very light, and it really ended up being super, super light. I don't know that I would stamp it with the white pigment ink again because it really faded into the sky. I think maybe I would just do a yellow, and then for the yellow background, mint for the mint one, and blue for the blue one. So probably tone on tone, Broken China, Cracked Pistachio, and Wild Honey. I think that probably would have worked better. I really thought this was going to work, and it just didn't. I was kind of bummed. And I didn't emboss it because I want to do the color layering layer, the more detailed cloud with a clear embossing ink and then white embossing powder. So as I mentioned, if I did this again, that's probably what I would do. I did not think it took away from the design, so I didn't worry about it. I didn't try to fix it or anything like that. But I did want to mention that here, just simply because as that white pigment ink dried, I really lost all the detail. When it was wet, I was like, oh, it looks so awesome. It's nice and faint. The white embossing is going to look awesome over it. And then not so much. When it dried, I really felt like we just lost all the detail. So simply stamping these, I did flip this around to stamp another cloud on the other side. I used all three of those clouds from the main kit. And I then am going to let this layer completely dry. You can heat this up with a heat tool to speed that up if you want to, or you can simply let it air dry. I let it air dry. This was kind of at the end of one day. I decided to let it dry overnight, and I came back to it the next day. And very much this is assembly line style card making. Now once I have all the clouds, once they are completely dry, it's time to add embossing. And we're going to do this with a clear embossing powder. And I started with that Hello Sandy greeting that I absolutely love, and the footprints in the sand. And I'm sprinkling on that sand embossing powder included in the kit. once I did this, you guys, I was just blown away. This embossing powder looks like sand. It's phenomenal. I'm so excited about it. Probably one of my favorite things in the kit. I really can't pick a favorite. I think this is maybe my all-time favorite My Monthly Hero card kit to date, because I could not stop creating cards with it. Obviously, this is a long video and I've got lots of cards to share with you. These are only the first 3, but look at just what you can create with the main kit. This isn't even all of the supplies. There's so much included in that main kit. Very much did all of my greetings, stamp and footprints, stamp that, emboss them, and then we will move on to doing the clouds and embossing that color layering layer for that. Awesome detail clouds. So just like stamping the white clouds up in the sky, and really at this point, I don't know when my pigment ink decided to fade so much, that the first layer, because I can still see it right here, and it didn't, the embossing powder didn't cling to it, so I'm not really sure if it just dried more or faded more. I have no idea. Anyway, this is the second layer, stamped with clear ink, embossing it with white embossing powder, and this is going to give some awesome clouds up in the sky that really help with that beachy feel. Now we're going to do this for all 3 cards just like before. The only difference in these designs is the color and the images I used to used either in the water and then the sentiment underneath hello. I switched that up too, just to show you that these cards would work for so many different occasions. Finish up these clouds really quick, and then we are going to start adding the finishing details. So these birds up in the sky, so cute. How about that little sailboat? This is the first one we're going to do. All 3 cards are going to feature the birds up in the sky. So the sky is pretty much the same for all 3. And then along the horizon line, we're going to stamp a sailboat. So the birds are stamped with a black VersaFine Onyx black ink. We're going to take the sailboat then, and that dye ink we used for the darkest layer in the water, the orange peel from Simon Says Stamp, we're going to use that to stamp the sailboat. And we're also going to use Clementine ink, which is our mid-tone color, to stamp the greeting thinking of you. That is also from the main kit stamp set. So we'll just ink that up. Originally I thought I'd do both, and then I decided to do the greeting a little bit lighter, so I just wiped that off real quick and then ink that up with Clementine instead. So we're going to stamp those at the same time. And that really basically almost finishes up this card. The only difference, or the only extra thing I guess I should say, is I added additional footprints, which I'll do here in a little bit, to all 3 cards. I wanted it to kind of look like footprints walking up to hello and then up into the water's edge. For the blue background, we've got some little birds. We've got the sentiment stamped with a blue ink then underneath. That is also from the main kit. We'll come back to the blue card. It's going to have the Adirondack chairs along the ocean's edge. And at this point, I was still contemplating maybe using the coordinating dies. You can see them laid out there for that. But I came up with a really fun way to not use them and still keep this flat. So we'll get to that in just a second. For the mint background card, we're going to have the mermaid sitting on the rock, kind of a silhouette of her, the silhouette of the birds. And the sentiment we're going to use actually comes from one of the add-on kits. This is the only add-on I used in this set of cards. This Life's a Beach is from the Beach Messages stamp set, stamped with that mint candy dye ink. Kind of just pulls that mint color down to the bottom part of the card and makes it, I didn't want it to be black. I thought the black ink would kind of take away from my beachy sand feel down there near the bottom. So I did those in all of those little additional greetings in a colorful ink. Then we're going to stamp the little rock and the mermaid in VersaFine Onyx Black ink in the water. Cute, cute little mermaid. There is also a dolphin. There is a palm tree, a starfish, a shell, a couple of different starfish. So you could, and a beach ball. So you could do a lot of different types of scenes. Now for the blue card with the Adirondack chair, I'm going to stamp this with a clear embossing ink, then sprinkle on white embossing powder, and I'm going to have a set of chairs there. And the white, which was my fear, I wanted the chairs to be white, but I felt like they kind of got lost into the water. So to combat that, I'm going to create a shadow behind it with my dye ink using that surf blue dye ink. So not moving my stamp off of my MISTI, I'm just going to shift my paper a very, very tiny bit, take that surf blue ink and stamp right over my embossed chair. It's going to have some ink pool up on the white embossing, but if you take a dry rag or a dry paper towel and buff that off, that's going to get rid of that. And look how much just that tiny little thing makes the chair pop. So excited about that. So I'm going to do the same thing for the second chair, stamp it with my clear embossing ink, sprinkle on my white embossing powder, and then stamp that again with the Caribbean blue dye ink. And that's really, other than stamping those additional footprints, sprinkling on the sand embossing powder, this card is going to be all finished. So, or the set of cards is going to be all finished. So my first 3 cards, only the main kit, and I'm only using a fraction of the main kit. There is so many amazing supplies in this. Now we're going to move on to the add-ons because I absolutely love the add-ons this month. As always, the add-ons are incredible and they add so much to your cards. So I'm using the Seize the Day Goals stamp set. I've stamped my images here on smooth white cardstock and I'm coloring them in with Copic markers. I have left this into the video. For those who like the coloring, you can definitely speed through this if you do not want to watch this and you want to move right on to that beachy background, which is going to be created with the Wave and Sea Confetti die, another add-on. This is an A2 sized background that creates amazing water designs. You could use it with so many of the stamps, either in the main kit or add-on stamp sets. These seagulls really spoke to me. I thought they were really cute. I liked the little pole. I thought it would be cute sticking into one of those little waves, almost like it's sticking up out of the water, with a larger seagull standing on it, and then the smaller ones flying in the air, and some little fish coming up out of the water. Very, very simple design, but I think it's really pretty and really effective, and I'm going to completely customize the background with Distress Oxide inks. You could create a whole set of these as well. There are 3 kind of larger seagull images. There's a lighthouse. If you wanted to do something a little bit different, you could use that lighthouse. There are several different shells, sand dollar, a fish, and then some little water waves, and lots of greetings, really punny type greetings. I'm using You Go Goal and Hey Girlfriend, which I thought were fun to send to your friends. Just really cute, clever types of punny type greetings. There is also just a thanks, Seize the Day with that's SEAS, waving hello, see you soon, which is SEA as well. So very, very cute. I sure do miss you. I think that would be an incredible one as well. The colors of Copic markers I use to color everything are listed across the top of the screen for easy reference. So if you're wondering exactly what I used, It is listed there. And even a couple of clouds I thought would be cute kind of up in the sky near my seagulls that are flying. We're going to die cut all of these with the coordinating Seize the Day Gulls dies. And then I have die cut that wave and sea confetti die background from Bristol Smooth cardstock. This is going to make it really easy to blend. Bristol Smooth cardstock is fantastic for regular distress inks or Distress Oxide inks, which I'm using here. I'm using Mermaid, Lagoon, Salty Ocean, Peacock, and Peacock Feathers Distress Oxide inks. Kind of just mixing and matching. There's not a definite transition from one to the other. I kind of had those three colors all over the place. Then I'm going to spritz this with water from a distress sprayer and blot it dry to give it an even more watery type of feel. Then I took another piece of cardstock, and this is actually smooth white cardstock. I just had it laying there. You could use Bristol Smooth cardstock. You'll get a smoother look. But because so little of this is actually going to be seen, it's very tone on tone, I didn't care that it was kind of blotchy. And I used Peacock Feathers and Mermaid Lagoon on it. And I didn't want it to be quite so tone on tone. It's tone on tone, but a piece of vellum sandwiched in between is going to give it a little bit more of a soft white look, maybe, or muted look, not white, muted look. White was too glaringly white, I thought, for the waves. I tried that first, I didn't like it, so I put vellum behind it, and then I put that other inked panel right behind this, sandwiching these three pieces together. And then I'm going to start building my scene. Each one's created exactly the same. They just feature a different main seagull image and greeting. The greetings are going to be stamped on black cardstock with a clear embossing ink, embossed with white embossing powder, and then popped up with foam adhesive. Everything else is adhered flat. I love how the little fish and the starfish and the wood post are all tucked into waves on the card. I think it gives it a much more realistic look. And then everything else is adhered on top, and then the greeting with foam adhesive squares. So my second background features a die cut panel that's been custom inked with Distress Oxide inks. Add detail to the eyes with a black glaze pen. And then add these panels to white top fold card bases to finish them up. The next cards I'm going to share are some kind of framed up scenes using a big background stamp. So there are two add-on background stamps. This is the first one, the Abstract Waves bold print, that I'm stamping on Bristol Smooth cardstock with embossing ink and then heat embossing with white embossing powder. And we're going to do embossed resist for these backgrounds. I'm using an ink or a powder tool rather on this first to deactivate it and keep the embossing ink only on the stamped part of the image. I'm going to create a couple of these backgrounds. These cards are, again, exactly the same design, so I'll only show putting together one, but I used different greetings for the main greeting and different sea lion images for them. These are going to feature the Seal of Approval stamp set and coordinating dies, and then the Beachy frame die is what I'm going to use to frame up this Abstract Waves bold print background. Embossed resist has just always been one of my favorite techniques. It's so easy, but so effective for creating beautiful backgrounds. We're doing all the stamping and embossing first, then we're going to ink over this and then buff off the ink from the embossed areas. So now we need to heat set this. And I always kind of like to hold my paper at an angle so I can see where the embossing powder has melted. Now I'm applying my same three colors of Distress Oxide ink that I used for my last backgrounds with the seagull cards and the awesome wave and sea confetti background. So same three colors here, Mermaid, Lagoon, Salty Ocean, and Peacock Feathers. Just switch back and forth. And then we're going to take a dry paper towel and buff off any of the excess ink, which is really going to make the Abstract Waves bold print pop. Then we're going to take the Beachy frame die and die cut that from white cardstock and pop it over. So just that center portion of this background is really going to show, and it's going to really kind of highlight the background. I'm going to do this for both of my backgrounds. You can see I just kind of messily added the ink all over the place. No real rhyme or reason, just did all three colors here and there. We'll buff off all of that excess. And then we're going to stamp our images. I'm combining not only the seal of approval images, but from the last cards that we did, the fish and seashell, some of those images from the Seize the Day Goals stamp set are going to work really nice with this too. I did use the Gemini craft die cutting machine to die cut this Beachy frame die. It's pretty intricate. One pass of the electronic machine and it die cut it perfectly. And look how awesome that frames up that beautiful background. So let's go ahead and grab our seal of approval images and stamp those, color them in. Again, I'm just going to speed through this pretty quickly. I did want a nice pop of color, and the beach ball is really going to provide that. I did kind of a traditional beach ball color here with my color palette. The colors I'm using are shown across the top of the screen. The seagull and fish were colored just like the last card, so I didn't share coloring those here. The seals are going to have a little bit darker gray colors than the seagulls. So we'll pull in a little more warm gray 7 and 6 and 1 for those after we get our beach balls all colored in. And then we've got shells. We're going to color with some browns, and the clam image, we're going to do that kind of peachy pink to add another little pop of color. These little images just kind of help bring some interest and color to this card. Kind of fast coloring here. One thing I did for the seals that added a lot of interest, and one of my very favorite techniques to do when coloring critters, is I added some little spots. So once I have my blending colored and the image colored exactly the way I want, I've done all my blending, it's exactly all the shadings done, I like to take my darker colors and add some little dot detail that you can see here, and it adds so much, especially to these seals. I think that really kind of takes them up a little bit. We're going to die cut all of these images with the coordinating seal of approval and Seize the Day Goals stamp set, or dies rather. And then all that's left is putting together the cards. When I'm using these frame dies from Hero Arts, I like to pop them up a lot. I think just a little bit of foam adhesive really adds a lot of interest. What I didn't do for my first card, but I did do the second, when I did the second one, I didn't realize, I kind of thought I would stamp my larger greeting on another piece of paper, and I did, and I didn't like it. So what I learned was I went ahead and lined up my greeting in my MISTI using my frame, removed the frame, and then stamped and embossed my greeting right over that stamped background. Worked beautifully. For the first one, I kind of had to finagle it using an acrylic block. It still worked. I was really glad it didn't ruin my background, but stamp it first and emboss it first before putting the card together. Like I said, I had a different vision to start with, and it just didn't work out, which is okay. I used some scrapbook adhesives, foam adhesive squares on the back of this to pop up my frame. I'm even going to pop up the seal and the beach ball, and then we're going to tuck the fish and seashells and things kind of along the bottom edge here. And then we'll stamp the greeting and add another little stamped phrase. That is actually from the Beach Please Stamp and Cut Stamp and Die set, which is another add-on and which will be featured in my final card share today. And that little phrase just kind of finishes off and adds to the design. I love these frames. They're so intricate and beautiful. The final thing I'm going to do to add interest to these cards is add Nouveau Crystal Drops in Simply White, and also, I believe, let me look and see what color this is, Sea Glass, Sea Breeze, which is a translucent blue, and that's going to add some, just a little finishing details, almost like little bubbles or whatever. There I was stamping that greeting. Here is the additional little phrase that I stamped several times, trimmed into a strip, and popped underneath. There's a look at the finished cards. My final card share today features the Beach Please Stamp and Cut, which I just mentioned that little phrase from the last cards is from. And for this one, I inked up my background first. So that's Fossilized Amber, Spiced Marmalade, and Abandoned Coral, which is one of my favorite beachy kind of summer color combinations. And this time we're going to stamp the background stamp. This is the Beachy Bold Prints background on top with clear embossing ink and heat emboss with white embossing powder. Now I trimmed this down a little bit to leave a white space at the top of my background. And I'm going to stamp a greeting from the Beach Please stamp set using Fossilized Amber and Abandoned Coral Distress Oxide inks up at the top. Kind of pulls the color from the bottom up to the top. I love the detail of this background stamp, so I really wanted a big bold piece of it on my card. Then I stamped another little phrase underneath with black ink. I'm going to add a black strip in between the white at the top of the card and then all the color at the bottom. This is just a really great way to add a nice little divider between the two. We're going to stamp images from the Beach Please stamp set, which is going to be the dog on the beach blanket, a little bottle of suntan lotion, and both drinks. I just thought it was so funny. So funny. I think this little dog is hilarious. And then color them in with Copic markers. I'm going to show most of the coloring here in the video. Some of it I just cut out to save a tiny bit of time here. The colors are all listed across the top of the screen, so if you're ever wondering exactly what I'm using, that's where that's going to be found. Once everything is all colored in, we will take those coordinating dies which come with this. This is the Stamp and Cut add-on for this month. And there are dies for all the little images here. We're going to die cut these, pop them in place. Just like the last card, I used some Nouveau Crystal Drops to add some little detail to the design, both in the bottom part where we did the inking and then stamping and embossing, and also up at the top, just kind of pulls that up to the top of the card. And then adding glossy accents to things like the glass drink there, so it looks more like glass, to the sunglasses, and to the nose on the dog. And I made sure and picked colors that, Copic colors, that would coordinate nicely with my ink colors that I used for this background. This background could be used in so many different ways. Just a fantastic, beautiful background. I love the umbrella and the flip-flops in this. Really, really fun. We'll finish coloring in this dog. Die cut these, glue these down in place. I used my favorite color combination for the dog, E40, 43, 44, and 47. I use this a lot. It's a nice go-to. Also E49 for the nose to get it nice and dark. So it's not black, but it's still a nice dark brown. And then the blankets in shades of red, The sunglasses are yellow. Her little necklace is going to be that peachy pink. And here's a look at all of the cards and the stamp sets I used for them. So I know I mentioned them throughout the video, but I thought it would be helpful to actually see them and see the cards that I created with them. So these are the first set of cards created with that main stamp set. This is the stamp set, the main June 2018 main kit stamp set. And then that one additional greeting that I used from Beach Messages, that Life's a Beach. This is the stamp set that comes from. The next set of cards, the Seagulls rather. Here is the two cards I created. The Seize the Day Goals stamp set. Here is what that looks like. There are coordinating dies. And then the Wave and Sea confetti die that I used for the background. Next, the framed up seals cards. Here are the two cards I created using the Seal of Approval stamp set. Here is what that stamp set looks like. 4 awesome seals, lots of greetings, the beach ball. There are coordinating dies for this. Now the seagulls and things are also all from that last stamp set that I shared with you. The Seize the Day Goals. So that's where all those little coordinating pieces came from. And then the background and stuff. Okay, so my final card. Guess I'll show these one more time. That one little greeting came from that Beach Please stamp set. So the background, abstract waves, bold print. That's what that looks like. And then the frame die. There's also a oval frame. This is the beachy frame die that I used for my seal cards. Finally, the Beach Please that I just finished sharing with you features that Beach Please Stampin' Cut and the beachy bold prints background. And there's what that looks like. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me and joining me today for this set of 8 cards featuring the My Monthly Hero June 2018 main card kit and add-ons. The supplies I used to create all 8 cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe for weekly card making and stamping videos. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.